Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Tonight, I'll be chatting with Laura Leigh Morris, who's the author of two books, 2018 story collection Jaws of Life from Vandalia Press, as well as a novel that came out last year from University Press of Kentucky called The Stonecatchers, which is currently a finalist for the Willie Morris Award for Southern Writing. She's published short fiction and essays in places such as Story Magazine, North American Review, and Florida Review. Originally from West Virginia, she's an associate professor of English at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. Are you ready to learn more about Laura's work? Me too. So let's sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
Hi there, everybody. I'm going to read an excerpt from The Stonecatchers. The Stonecatchers is a story about the aftermath of a school shooting. So the story opens with four people in a community college classroom, and they're trying to hold the shooter out of the classroom. And when the shooter bursts through, they attack him in an attempt to disarm him, but in an attempt to disarm him, they actually end up kind of getting into that frenzy and killing him. And in the aftermath, they have to learn how to live with themselves again. So that's kind of the setup here. And our first chapter is told through the first person in the classroom, the teacher. So Danetta Freeman. And the second chapter is told from Charlie Folger, who is a student in the classroom. And I'm going to jump partway into the third chapter. And this student is Priscilla Silver. Priscilla is 19, 20 years old. She is a young single mother. Her own mother kicked her out of her house when she found out she was pregnant. Priscilla has been living in an apartment and kind of trying to build her life back, figure out who she is in all of this. And in the aftermath of the shooting, she's returned to her mom's house. And her mom is kind of domineering and trying to say, hey, you can stay with me if you talk to the cameras. Somebody has to talk to the cameras. And she's enlisted her daughter to be that person who's going to talk to the cameras. And this scene is when her mom kind of releases her on on the news cameras right at Brickton Community College. And here's this little scene. Her mom her mom pulled the blazer straight, buttoned it across her middle, and then propped Rhonda in Priscilla's arms. You looked perfect. The baby had a bow tied around her hairless head, one Priscilla's mom had found in a bag of Christmas decorations she kept in the attic. She kept grabbing at it with her sticky hands, and Priscilla kept pulling them away. Priscilla's toes were pinched in her mom's tiny shoes, the heel so high it felt like she might tip over. Her mom turned her toward the row of news vans that hugged BCC's campus. Priscilla felt sick at the sight of the gathered crowds and police. She'd never actually thought past the getting ready part. Wasn't prepared to talk about what had happened. She closed her eyes. I can't do this. Her mom blanched and grabbed her arm, turning her around and stepping inches from her face. We did all this work. Don't let me down. Her lips pulled tight against her teeth, a grimace. Priscilla had let her mom down plenty in the past year. She wasn't sure the relationship would survive another disappointment. She took a deep breath, forced her knees to stop shaking, and raised her chin. Her mom smiled, the light returning to her eyes. That's my girl. It was what Priscilla needed to walk toward the closest news van. A woman with hair almost as big as Priscilla's stood beside a cameraman. Both of them looked tired. The reporter's makeup barely covered dark circles under her eyes. I'm Priscilla Silver, she said, so quiet the woman didn't hear. She tried again louder. I'm Priscilla Silver. I survived the shooting. The woman turned, a blank look immediately replaced by a warm smile and a hand on Priscilla's shoulder. Priscilla Silver, the woman said. The woman repeated, gesturing toward the camera. Everyone's been looking for you, wanting to hear your story. Would you be willing? Of course, Priscilla said. She was already arranging her face into an appropriately pained expression. She tried to still her pounding heart, wasn't quite sure where to look, at the lens, at the woman. She aimed for somewhere in between. You can look at me, the woman said, a kindly smile on her face. which set Priscilla at ease. The reporter spoke into the camera. I'm here with Priscilla Silver, survivor of the shooting at Brickton Community College. She turned to Priscilla, gave her another of those kindly smiles, said, Thank you for being here today. I know you must be going through a whirlwind of emotions. Can you tell us how you're holding up? For a moment, Priscilla stared at the microphone the woman had pushed toward her, mind completely blank. Then she spotted her mom nodding encouragement from back by the car. Other reporters were starting to notice her, were making their way over, cameramen in tow. Priscilla propped Rhonda on her hip. Rhonda's her baby. Sorry about that. Said, Now that I'm back with my Rhonda and my mom, I feel a little better. Other words came out of her mouth, but she wasn't sure what she said. She marveled as more and more reporters gathered, leaning forward with microphones to catch her words. She forced herself not to smile at them, kept the sad, drawn look on her face, occasionally wiped dry eyes. When someone asked about Sutter, a student who died in her classroom, she felt sick. She didn't want to talk about him, didn't want to actually think about being in that classroom. She closed her eyes, felt real tears for the first time, pushed the image away, and said the only thing she could. Sutter saved us all. He's the hero of BCC. Will you attend the memorial? Someone asked. Memorial? She hadn't heard about any memorial, had only seen impromptu crowds gathered, didn't want to join them. BCC will hold a memorial tomorrow. It seemed too soon. Priscilla had remained focused on her mom and Rhonda, couldn't think about the classroom yet. Or Wayne, definitely not Wayne. Wayne was the shooter. But her mom would expect her to go, would say it was good to put in FaceTime. I'll be there, she said. I wouldn't miss it. None of the reporters walked away. They kept yelling questions, and Priscilla answered them until Rhonda started to fuss and scrub her eyes. Soon she'd scream and thrash about. Priscilla was surprised she hadn't already. Hell child, she called the baby when they were home alone, and her face turned red and she threw herself backward on the floor. Then Priscilla closed Rhonda's bedroom door and walked outside. Even in the parking lot, she could hear the baby, but at least Priscilla couldn't smack her from there. She went inside when the desire passed. Priscilla thanked everyone for talking to her and squeezed a few reporters' arms. They reached back, shook her hand, gave her half hugs. A few cameras caught this, too. Once no one else reached out, she walked toward her mom, careful to keep her back straight, not to let her ankles wobble. She knew at least some of the cameras followed her, that she'd just become the face of the school shooting. A media darling. Thank you.
Laura, that was wonderful. Um, I I have to admit that I haven't been able to finish the book yet. That for me, I can read sort of a little bit, and then I got to give myself a couple week break. Um, but it's one of those kind of books that even though I'm giving myself that break, I know it's a break and not that I'm putting the book right. Like I know I'm coming back to that book. Um,
Intense book. It's an intense story.
yeah, and I'm something I'm kind of curious about is when you were writing it, because when I read things, sometimes I think about the process of the writing of it as like part of my brain's engaged in the story. And I just thought, how did she keep herself grounded while enmeshed in this story? So what did you do to protect yourself as you were writing?
So, this is a weird one. So for years now, for about I'd say about 15 years now, I've also taught in prison. So I haven't been doing it for about the past year and a half. But there's a rule in prison where you go in and you can never ever forget you're in prison. Like you have to remember for safety reasons that you're always in prison. And at the same time, you have to completely forget you're in prison because you have to be present for the people that you're teaching, that you're working with in there. And this is a lesson that I was able to take into the writing. When I'm in the writing, or what was in the writing, I was there 100%. But when I walked away from it, I was actually able to walk away. I had to kind of shut it off for myself. And I think it's a safety mechanism. You keep these different parts of yourself on at the same time, on and off, so that you can protect yourself so that you can stay safe, but you have to be fully engaged. Same in prison. You have to be engaged when you're there and you have to be able to shut it off. And it's a lesson I was able to take into writing this book so that even though it's heavy subject matter, it's hard to write, it's hard to read. I could walk away. I could let myself walk away.
That's wow. That's like my response to that is like, wow. Um, that because the writing is really impressive on a sentence level, on a plot structure, on a character, like all of it is very impressive. And to hear that you also were able to distance your like to be all in and distance yourself, like, wow, that's that's amazing. Um, I'm so glad that you have chosen to share these stories, the stories of these characters with readers. Um, and that kind of brings up a question for me into our sort of pre-planned questions. Um, what book has created the most mayhem in your life?
Mhm. As I move from like that first question to this one, I feel like it should be something like that's horrifying about school shootings or something about murder or something. And instead, as I was thinking about this today, I was like, it's about writing. So I actually brought this book home from work. I taught this book this semester. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is Jane Allison's Meander Spiral Explode. And it's about thinking beyond our basic story, like our basic arc that we use in story structure, and really thinking about all of these different shapes that story can take. And so I had read parts of it before, and then I've been teaching it this semester, and I'm just finishing my semester. And it has forced me to think so differently about all story. Everything I write, everything I read, and just to come back at it and go, how else can I think about this? How can I disrupt patterns that we expect and to think about new patterns? And it really has created mayhem in both my reading and my writing life in ways that I never quite expected.
Oh, wow. I read that book um sometime within the last year.
Mhm.
'Cause I've been working on a novel that doesn't really it doesn't follow a traditional narrative, and I was sort of getting pressure from people to put it in a traditional narrative, and my friend was like, "You need to read this book."
That's
Um
fantastic. Yes.
yeah. And oh, it's brilliant. You said that it's affected your life as a reader as well as a writer. In what ways do you feel like it's affected your life as a reader?
Well, I'm always like, I'm reading books and I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't fit my expectations. And when a book doesn't fit my expectations, I'm asking, well, what did I expect and why did I expect that? Um, oh, what is it? It's Pineville Trace by Wes Blake. I keep expecting, like, oh no, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And then I'm like, wait, but it's not. And I'm like, no, no, he's playing with these different structures. So whenever a story is busting and moving away from those structures, I'm saying, why is that happening? And instead of saying, oh, this like isn't working for me in certain ways, I'm saying, what is it doing instead? What is it? And I love saying, because I really think that every writer comes at their book deliberately and they say, I'm trying to do X. And whatever they're trying to do doesn't have to fit that structure. And I'm learning to fall in love with all of these books that are meandering, that are spiraling, that are really thinking about ways to come at story differently and to tell different sorts of stories.
Ah, that's wonderful. What book are is there a book that you're reading right now?
Yes. Oh my goodness, I am reading and I am going to, it is The Mourner's Bestiary by Erin Caffel, and I might be pronouncing her last name incorrectly. And it is brilliant. It is a collection of essays about uh, a um, a terminal kidney disease that has followed through her whole family. At the same time, it's also about global warming and ruining our waterways. And she's braiding these two together, and it's a memoir, and it is it it brings amazing research at the same time that it is so personal, and it's just heartbreaking in so many ways, and it makes our heart break for her family and the things that her family's gone through, but it also makes our heart break for the earth that we live in. And I've been listening to it for 3 days, and I've been telling all sorts of people about it. I was talking to my husband about it, like after I'd finished the first essay. I was like, "Oh, you have to hear about this. Please, please, please let me tell you." And it is and does it follow the conventional plot structure? Not exactly. I think creative nonfiction often doesn't. Novels, it feels like they have to more, but I love exploring how creative nonfiction goes outside of that regular plot too.
Do you, because I know you've also written some essays in addition to stories and the books. Do you ever have any thoughts of writing a nonfiction book?
Someday. So I taught at a prison in Texas for 3 years. And then I moved to South Carolina, and it took a few years for me to get into prison education. And then I actually created a prison program, an education program with a partner here at Furman University. She and I worked together to create this program, this educational program. Unfortunately, the first semester we were really supposed to get going was fall of 2020, and we all know what happened then. So the program ended up falling apart. It was a very long, slow death for the program, and it makes me so sad. I cried for weeks afterward, but I want to write about my experiences in prison. Uh, right now, and I had thought, oh, I can do this in a novel. Like I'm mostly a fiction writer. I can do this in a novel. And I eventually realized I can't do this as a novel. Like the prison book that I have to write is going to be about my experiences working in prison. And I'm not quite ready for it yet. I've written a few essays, and I have well, I've written maybe 6 or 8 essays. I have a few of them coming out in North American Review next year, but I'm kind of meandering, trying to figure out my way forward there and what that looks like, because I think research is a part of it, and these unconventional structures are a part of it. I love hermit crab essays, so I'm thinking about all of these ways to bring what the American prison system is together with my experiences teaching in it as a middle class white lady. So, and I think that changes how we even view prison, how we walk into it ourselves. So, and as a middle class white lady who, was working on my PhD the first time I walked in, now I have a PhD, like how does that change how I negotiate those spaces? And I really want to play with that in the book, but that's kind of a little farther in the future, but I'm really hoping to do it someday.
Well, I will keep my eye open for that coming. And it's so interesting to me to hear you talk about writing about that as well as what's in the Stonecatchers, because I first encountered your work in the Women Speak anthology. And so when I picked up the Stonecatchers, I was kind of ready for speculative. And I
Yes.
was like, oh, this is grounded in reality, hardcore. Um, do you um do you find yourself gravitating towards one or the other? Because oftentimes people either write realistic fiction or they write speculative. And the fact that you're able to do both and kind of switch between the two skillfully is awesome. Do you ever think, oh, I should only be doing one or the other? This is a very meandering question, so just take it wherever you want. I'm just interested in the fact that you write both is where it's going.
No, I love it. I love it just because so the Stonecatchers I started in 2017, and my son was born in June of 21. I finished it about a year later. But while I was shortly after he was born, when I needed to start writing again, but I didn't have time. And I was a first-time mother at 41. So I became a stepmom at 40 to an 11-year-old, and then shortly thereafter my son was born, and suddenly I had an 11 or a 12 and a half year old when he was born, and then a newborn. And I have to say, domesticity is weird. Motherhood is weird. And I had never written anything that was speculative before that, but after he was born, and I was suddenly like, look, this little creature he needs me in all of these ways. Like, the only way I could come at it was through speculative fiction. So, all like pretty much everything I've written since he was born has become speculative. So I have a whole collection of these little stories about domesticity. I call them my uncanny domestics. And they're all these weird things about like babies being born with horns and tails, and which is the one you ran across, a woman growing wings after giving birth, and a woman turning into an actual bear when she's acting like a mama bear for her son. And I love speculative fiction. I just feel like I've been able to kind of flap my own wings, my metaphoric wings, and go in these different directions. So everything, I have the feeling I'm going to be moving between them a lot and kind of hinting at the speculative more and more. I've been loving books that I've been reading recently. Rachel Yoder's Night Bitch, which I know is coming out in a film soon, but if it's not out already, but she in this like I found myself going, but wait, is it speculative? Or is this just her own psyche doing this to her? And it's so unclear in that book. And I thought, this is a great weird place to live, right between like the realism and speculative, and in that gray area in between. And I find myself gravitating more and more there as my writing progresses.
Did you did you enjoy reading speculative before you started writing it, before you had those experiences where you started writing it, or did you also just now start reading?
I read sci-fi, but not fantasy. Um, and I read some magic realism, and I've been reading more and more magic realism. Like, that's something I've been diving into. So I have to say I've been reading more speculative fiction since I started writing it, and really exploring the limits of it. And not that I even know the limits. I feel like I'm still a beginner in that realm because there's so much and there's so much to do. And even my students, when I'm teaching, and they're like, well, what are all of the different ways of writing speculative fiction? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have all the answers here, but let's explore it together. And I'll tell them about some of what I'm reading, and then they'll tell me what they're reading. And I'll say, I haven't read anything like that. So, and then we're talking about high fantasy versus low fantasy. And I'm like, I don't dive into fantasy much, but it's so much fun to explore all of the nooks and crannies of speculative. And I feel like I'm kind of joining this whole new club, and there's so much more that I'm going to explore here.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing how the club goes for you, because I enjoyed the piece that was in Women Speak. And I think, are you in the anthology again for 2025 as well? I thought I saw.
Yeah, yeah.
But is that another speculative piece, or is that more reality grounded?
It's a little more, it's actually, it starts reality grounded and it gets like slightly speculative. So, it's one of those same uncanny domestics. So I keep thinking about these ways that motherhood gets weird, and it's another motherhood is weird sort of story.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to reading it when it comes out. A question that I have, um, another question I have for you is thinking back to that earlier version of Laura,
Hmm.
either when you were still writing primarily um, realism, or even before that. What kind of advice would you give to that earlier version of yourself?
I love this question. I really do. Um, I think to young Laura, and this is young Laura always, and I think young Laura, I don't know, it's maybe not yesterday, but it's a little while ago. But and 30 years ago, I'll say, enjoy the process. So I think when we're young, we so want to publish, we so want to be there. And it's this like rush, rush, rush. And I remember telling like one of my professors, like, I think I'll start publishing soon. I think some journals will want it. And this was a million years ago, and I wasn't ready. But I was still learning my chops and still figuring things out. And I was in such a rush that I forgot to focus on just like the exploration, the figuring it out, the learning my chops, the looking at a story that a million other people have read, but my looking at it for the first time and going, the first time I read a Eudora Welty short story and going, how'd she do that? How can I emulate that? And I want to tell young Laura to enjoy the wonder of learning all of it, because I think we're always in a rush. And I guess that I would even say that to me yesterday, to tell you the truth. Like, stop being in a rush and just enjoy the wonder of it all.
Oh, that's that is such good advice. And it makes for better writing too, because you can I think for me, I would sometimes be in such a rush that I would sort of rush revisions. And even though I
Yes.
would know like, yeah, that needs changed, I'd be like, oh, but I want to submit this. I want to get this out in the world. And yeah, so I think that it helps on that advice is so good on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been writing, so the speculative work I've been writing has been really, really, a lot of it's been flash or near flash. And I think when you write flash fiction under 1,000 words, there's always this idea that like you rush, 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 you get it out there. And it's always this reminder of like, no, no, stop yourself. Stop yourself. Go back to it. It still needs work. And this is something that I think, I don't know, aren't we all guilty of that though? I want to send it out. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah. It's kind of a good sign, right?
Yeah.
That you believe in your work.
That
So
actually is a really good sign. Like, I believe in my own work. I mean, I don't believe in it all the time, every day. There are days that I'm like, it's awful, but it's nice to believe in it and nice to say, I feel good about what I'm doing and I feel confident in the work.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Do you think that any of the earlier versions of Laura would look at you today and have any advice for you now?
I think they would. I think they would t like, so now me keeps saying, what's next? What's next? What's next? Let's work on this book. What is the Stonecatchers doing out in the world? Are people looking at it? Are people reading it? And then when will the next book be picked up? And how do I? And I think young me would say, you did what you set out to do. Like, you did it. And I remember when I left, so I did my PhD in Texas, at Texas A&M University, and I left there in 2015. And I was teaching in prison the last 3 years I was there. And the last thing I did in Texas was I actually taught my very last class at the women's prison there. And I remember the women asking me, like, what's next? And I had told them where I was moving, what I was doing, but they're like, what do you look forward to in your future? And I remember saying, I just want to sell that book. I just want to sell that one book. And I sold it a while ago. Like, The Stonecatchers is my second book. Like, and it's this weird thing where it's like, no, no, I did what I'd set out to do. And it's okay just to sit here and breathe a little and say, I did it. And to enjoy that feeling of having your work out in the world. And I think 15-year-old, 20-year-old, 35-year-old Laura would tell me to slow down and pause in this moment and say, look, Laura, you have two books out. You're publishing stories, things are going well. Look at what you've done and just smile and revel in it for a few minutes and don't rush to the next thing, because I'm often rushing to the next thing. And I think that's something we're always like trying to catch that next whatever fly, whatever, and saying it's okay just to sit here in this moment and say, this is good. This is a good place to be. And that's something I've been working on. I'm not going to say I've always been successful, but I think young Laura would tell me, like, keep working on that.
Do you have any tips for other folks who are also working on that? Anything that you've found is especially helpful?
I'm not sure I found anything to be helpful yet. I'm I think it's I think focusing on some other things. So I am so the Stonecatchers came out in August. I teach full time and I'm also going to be so I teach full time at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm going to be doing some part-time work, working in the low residency MFA program at West Virginia Wesleyan College, which I'm super excited about. But that also means that I have less and less time.
Mm.
And I am trying to focus on some other things and not saying I have to be writing constantly, I have to be producing constantly. And I think that's something for other writers to hopefully that helps them too, to give yourself permission to say, I don't always have to be writing. It's okay to take a break and look at what I've done and to focus on some other things. I'm going to be teaching summer school this summer, which is, 5 days a week. And my stepdaughter is going to be here from Illinois during that time. And I have the 3-year-old. And I actually have given myself permission just to be here. There is no writing that needs to happen. I want to do a few things around the house. I want to do a little painting. I want to pick out some furniture for a renovation we're doing. And that's I feel like in order not to say I need to keep going, I have to actually give myself some other tasks. So maybe that's it, saying, what is another task you can do that is going to be fulfilling, but isn't going to be the always looking to be writing, always looking to be achieving?
Oh, that's good. It's just distraction. Distract yourself to something else.
Yeah. And it's not like, hey, look, there's a dangly shiny thing, but it's also it's other stuff I want to be doing that I don't always give myself time for. So, and that's the big thing. I really want to give myself time to say, ah, I am just going to work on the house. My husband and I are both writers. We're both teachers, so the house often goes insane during the semester. And it'd be nice just to do a few projects that we've wanted to do and not think about everything else.
Ah, that sounds lovely. Is he on board with that kind of idea, or is he?
I think he is. I think he's more on board than me. He does a much better job of not just doing the writing. He's like, I love board games and I love these other things and I just want to revel in life. And he's really good at that. And sometimes reminds me like, come on, Laura, it's time to stop. It's time to do something else. And I'm like, you're right. So he often actually brings me back down to earth and says it's time to think about every other part of life.
Awesome. And I love that that advice is so different from what young writers might be getting from the you have to sit down in your chair at the exact same time every day and write because we're while we're when we're filming this is we're just kind of coming out of November and some
Yeah.
folks doing the NaNoWriMo and doing get, get these word counts in. And so
Hmm.
it's lovely to hear this idea of like, have a life too. It's cool, right? Your writing will be better for it. Your life will be better for it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, my goal is always to sit down and get 30 minutes on a manuscript a day, 5 days a week. That doesn't always happen. And that's kind of my I do like to sit down, but it's good to step away, especially when you've been working at it really hard. I think it's important to step away. When Angie Cruz came here to Furman to speak and her oh, I forget the name of it. How to I am blanking on the name of her most recent novel, but she said she took a year off at one point. She just took a year off and she didn't write anything for a year. And she said it was kind of glorious. She felt a little bit lost, but also she felt like she could focus on some other things. And her novel Dominicana won all of these awards, and it was after Dominicana, and she didn't feel like she needed to rush. She said, I just took a little time. And I thought, that sounds lovely that somebody, as accomplished as her is just saying, I'm walking away for a few minutes, I'm pausing, and I'm going to focus on other parts of my life. And I'm like, it's good advice. It's good advice that I need to take in. And I don't think she was giving it as advice, but I needed to take it as advice.
Oh, I love it. That is absolutely wonderful. And I thank you for spending a little bit of your time, of your precious time with us today. Thank you so much, Laura, for chatting with me.
Oh, thank you, Jen, for inviting me here. I am so glad to talk to you, and it's always lovely to sit down and just chat writing. It always makes me want to write more at the same time that I'm saying step away a little bit. It makes me excited about the writing life.
What a fun interview that was. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed talking. And as much as I'm enjoying reading Laura's book. Um, and it's one of those books that I'm gonna finish it. It's kind of like Ali Stein's Road Out of Winter. It was the same way that I would read about a chapter, okay, have to take a couple weeks off, read another chapter, take a couple weeks off. Um, but the stories stayed with me through those weeks, and that's what's been happening in reading this as well. Um, the the story stays with you. And sometimes that little bit of time gives you some space to collect yourself, especially after the first chapter, I think. Um, so I hope you all will check it out and all the other books that we talked about. It's a little bit late. I'm experimenting with sometimes I do the interviews right after work. And so I'm experimenting now with trying to do them later in the evening. And I did feel more like awake during the interview itself. But now at the ending, I'm feeling very tired and not sure I have anything of use to say. So I should just shut up, right? Hmm. Thanks for stopping by.